Hi everyone, welcome to THD, and today we're going to be ranking cards from Shadow of the Galaxy. A lot of people have asked me to do a tier list of every single card of Shadows of the Galaxy, just like I did for Spark of Rebellion. But I've decided that doing a tier list the same way I did it for Spark of Rebellion would be too time consuming, and also something to understand is that I got more than 6 months to be able to play thoroughly all the cards from Spark of Rebellion, so I had a pretty solid opinion about every single cards, but obviously I didn't have such time, such luxury with Shadows of the Galaxy. So instead, I've decided to go for something a little bit more fun, where I would be ranking top threes of every card in Shadow of the Galaxies in different categories, the same way of an Olympic game, attributing a gold, silver, and bronze medal to every single card in each categories. And I thought that was going to be a little bit more of a fun way to to do this, and especially with the Olympic Games coming on in a few weeks, I thought that would be kind of a more fun way to do things. So without further ado, let's go with the first category, which is the villainy cunning. So first we got a couple of honorable mentions. Obviously, a top three is very restrictive, so I needed to. So it was very hard to choose because the villainy cunning category is extremely dense in good cards in this set. So in honorable mention, decided to put Lurking Tide Phantoms, which I think is an incredible card against a lot of decks, and is for sure going to be an absolute staple in sideboards for Cunning Villainy. And obviously it's going to be what certain decks are going to be based on. I think Locking TIE Phantom's combination with Starkin is incredible because one of the only weakness of TIE Phantom is that it's relatively easy to kill, but once you start growing his body, it becomes just an unstoppable force that cannot be removed by removal events, which makes it incredible. Obviously, the combo F4 LOM Zucus, which I think is a strong boost to Cunning Villainy in general, deserved an honorable mention. With the bronze medal, I decided to give it to Triple Dark Raid. I think this card is extremely powerful. It's kind of like a sneak attack in the sense that it allows you to put a card with a strong discount, but the discount is bigger because you are saving 2 resources instead of 1. It also digs top 7 of your deck, which gives you a little bit of card selection, or you don't need to hold both cards, sneak attack, and um, and the card that you want to play in hand to be able to use that. You just need triple Dark Raid and that's it. And instead of the card being defeated, it returns back into your hand. So you're actually not doing card advantage the same way you do with Sneak Attack whenever you're using triple Dark Raid. So triple Dark Raid is, in my opinion, a much better card than Sneak Attack, but its main weakness is that obviously it only works on vehicles, so you really need to build a vehicle-centric deck. So in my opinion, it is the card in Shadows of the Galaxy which has the most potential for the future. But right now it's limited by the fact that it only works on vehicle, and there's not that many vehicles that really work great with triple Dark Raid. But there are a few that work really great, and there's definitely some decks that are going to be using triple Dark Raid. So I only putting it on the third place, but I think it's a card that has potential, that has the most potential out of any card of Shadows of the Galaxy for the future in terms of how much stronger this card can be. And for this, well deserving of the bronze medal. In silver medal, I decided to put Frozen in Carbonite. I think Frozen Carbonite is one of the most powerful removal in the entire game. It basically just completely neglect a unit. Like obviously abilities can still work, but most of the ability in these games are on attack ability or ability that requires the unit to that comes into play. So in the vast majority of units, it's pretty much as good as just straight up killing it. Like because the unit is just going to be exhausted every turn and cannot be ready even if you play a card like ready for battle. You won't be able to ready the card. Uh, it's just incredible. The main weakness of the card, and the reason why I didn't put this in the gold medal, is that it is susceptible to upgrade removal, which I think there's going to be plenty of in the set. With all that being said, I still think it's a card that's going to see a lot of play, especially in control, yellow, black decks, and it's just a very powerful card. And I think this is one of the strongest upgrade that the control decks have been getting this expansion. With the gold medal, unsurprisingly, it is Bazine Nettle. She's gonna see play at least in the main deck or in the sideboard in every single villainy black deck. She is incredibly effective at attacking the opponent hand. Can be played early on to prevent your opponent from and allows you to effectively force your opponent to skip a turn if you unless your opponent exactly redraw a copy replacement of the card he just discarded. But the chance of you being able to make your opponent skip turns with that card is incredible. And then the 1/3 body is nice to have. Can be bounced back with McClunky. Can there's lots of synergies surrounding Underworld in the set with entering battlefield effect. And then obviously icing on the cake, she can be smuggled, uh, which I think is very good, especially for a card like this where you don't mind paying extra resources for discard effect because there's specific moments where you need a specific discard effect. So you want to get rid of like a super laser blast, or you want to get rid of an important late game card. You're more than okay to spend 4 resources if you want to get rid of a Crater Dragon or a Luke Skywalker or something very big that is about to come on you. So this card is absolutely incredible. It's going to be played in, as I said, in every single yellow villainy decks, and it's going to be a strong upgrade. I'm also anticipating this card might even be played out of aspect, just the same way as Spark of Rebellion was played out of aspect in some decks. Yeah, it's a strong card against control, but it's also a card that control themselves will play, and to be able to have a bit more control over what your opponent hand. And this is another amazing boost for cunning villainy control decks, at the same time as being a counter to them. So, sorry. Moving on now to Cunning Heroism. So, unlike Cunning Villainy, and just like in Spark of Rebellion, Cunning Heroism did not really get a lot of stuff. It was already considered the weakest color combination in the first set, and I think, unfortunately, it's going to be the exact same thing in set 2. I think Cunning Heroism is by far the weakest aspect combinations in the game, and I don't see this changing with Shadows of the Galaxy, unfortunately, because we didn't really get a whole lot in that category. So that's why I'm not going to put any honorable mention and jump directly into our bronze medal, which is going to be Cartel Turncoat. A very cheap unit that is hard to kill, and because of course it's in space, it's not so easy to interact with, and the fact that it has 3 health, that is so cheap, and it is in space, makes it that the downside of making your opponent draw a card when he dies is not that big of a downside, because you know that your opponent is going to have to mobilize significant resources to get rid of him. So you're okay with him in drawing a card. It's a very cheap aggressive card, which I'm assuming will see play in most aggressive deck that runs this color combination. Also, we're seeing an emergence of old space decks, so decks that basically only play space units, and I believe Carterton Code is going to be quite a good card in those decks. So, moving on to our silver medal, it is L337, just a very solid card. 2/2 for 2 shielded have been something that has been quite good in Shadows of the Galaxy. No, so in Spark of Rebellion with Crafty Smuggler. And L337 is basically a 2/2 for 2 shielded, but with a bunch of upsides. So it can rescue unit, which is I think not something that's going to be very relevant to the meta, but what is very important is that it can be smuggled, so you can play it from your discard pile. So if you're looking for a card that is cheap to smuggle and quite effective, L337 is going to be a good card. I don't think it's an auto include in Cunning Heroism, but it's honestly very close to be. And I think it's a very solid card. And if a capture ever becomes something that sees a significant amount of play in Shadows of the Galaxy, I think it's going to be a very good card. I'm still not a big fan of capture. I still think capture is kind of weak. But who knows? There might be a meta where capture becomes a thing and she's gonna become super relevant. Anyway, she's gonna see a significant amount of play even without capture being a thing. So well deserving of a silver medal. And for the gold medal, I decided to choose Kira. Uh, she comes into play. She's basically a regional governor with much better stats, and also the ability to affect to you be able to see your opponent hand and then name a card instead of just naming the card completely in the dark. I think this is a significant improvement over Regional Governor. So obviously Regional Governor has some advantage being much cheaper, and the fact that she completely outright prevent the card from being played at all. So that definitely make Regional Governor in some sense good. So I think I put the card. I think the card is slightly better than Regional Governor. Regional Governor being mono blue also means that she can be played in a wider amount of decks, while Kira is a bit more specialized. So I think Kira overall is a slightly better card, but it's not by a lot. But anyway, Regional Governor is a very good card. And to be honest, as I said, Cunning Heroism did not really get a lot of stuff in this set, so the competition was not too tough for Kira, and that's why she managed to get into the first place. In my opinion, it is going to be the Cunning Heroism card that's going to see the most play. Um, anyway, next we got the Cunning category, the Mono Cunning category. And in there we also have a lot of honorable mentions. There's a lot of great cunning cards in this set. So a new adventurer, which turned out to be a lot more situational than I thought it would be, but it still is an amazing card. Can be used offensively to exhaust enemy a non-leader unit. Obviously, the main use of it is to heal and re-trigger when played ability on your own unit, and there's plenty of them in Cunning. It's amazing with Fire Spray. We want to untap your Fire Spray, we want to attack again. Cantina Bouncer, Body Rook, or even Body Rook. There's just plenty of great application for the card. It is a situational card, but it is very powerful. So yeah, well deserved honorable mention. Enticing Reward, I think, is the strongest bounty in yellow. Um, Being able to basically get two cards out of so a lot of card advantage, that you can dig very deep. You can dig up to 10 cards. I think this is the card that the control decks were looking for in order to produce card advantage and really get ahead of their opponent. So far, control decks had to rely on cards like I Am Your Father to draw a card, which is a mediocre card to say the least. Enticing Reward has this strong quality of giving you two non-unit cards, which is perfect for control deck, and dig very deep for them, which means that you can also get to have a very good selection of the card that you want. And then finally, we got Evacuate, which is kind of the so Evacuate is very powerful. I'm still not completely sure on how powerful the card is, because really the fact that it puts the card back into your opponent's hand in the context of a control deck is very annoying compared to just outright killing them. But the sheer effectiveness on the board for the price is still something that is extremely valuable. So it's gonna see play for sure. The question that I think people are kind of wondering is how much it's gonna see play. So those are my honorable mentions. So you see, that's already a lot of very good cards here. But let's talk now into the number 3. So by the way, when I put honorable mention, I don't necessarily. Obviously, there are really good cards that I'm not putting in that ranking, but whenever I decided to not put it as an honorable mention is because I think that even though those cards are very good, I did not consider putting them in the top 3. While honorable mentions are basically cards that I really thought could have made the top 3, and I mean, some people would put them in their top 3 for sure. In bronze, I decided to select Cloud Rider, just a very effective one drop, the only 2 cost card in the game that has ambush, and the 3 attack means that it can kill a significant amount of units in the early stages of the game. So I think it's a very solid card that's going to see play in a lot of yellow decks. Not all of them, but in a lot of them. Moving on, we got McClunky. McClunky is just a very is a lot better than what I initially thought. I think it's incredible in the context of a Boba deck, because Boba can simply just ready a resource and effectively plays McClunky for free. And something that's for free that can deal 3 damage to any unit is incredible. There's just so many underworld units in that are cheap or are powerful when played effect, that the interactions are very powerful. I think McClunky is a card that really impressed me a lot, and I think this card is very strong. It makes it for some very good early game with Cunning Boba. Moving on, I decided to put a gold medal on Boba Fett's armor. So Boba Fett's armor might not be is not a card that is good against everybody. Against aggro, giving +2/+2 to your Boba Fett and making him pretty much invincible doesn't really impact the game so much. Against control, they can just rivals fall your Boba Fett, and it doesn't really have much of an impact. So in some matchup, it's simply just a +2/+2 for 2, which is not very good. But against pretty much everything else, Boba Fett's armor is an absolutely massive game changer. Basically, making your Boba Fett almost invincible is is very unfair in my opinion. This card is I've been testing quite a bit with this card, and once again, it's not good against everything, but when it's good, it's absolutely game breaking. And this card, I think, is going to have a huge impact on the meta. I think that it is possible that some decks might not be playable just because this card exists. If Boba Fett indeed becomes the a tier one deck, as I think a lot of people expect, and those decks play like 2 or 3 copies of Fett's armor, it's going to be very difficult for decks that are trying to kill things with damage, like any sort of like Palpatine Red or Vader Red, which initially were decks that had quite a good matchup against Boba. Those decks are going to struggle immensely against card like Boba Fett's armor. So yes, it's not good against everything. It's not good in every deck. Of course, you have to be playing a Boba deck to be playing it. But I think its impact on the meta it by itself is deserving of this card being deserving the gold medal in this category of mono cunning. So moving on now, we are talking about the villainy vigilance card. So without further ado, let's get into our first card. Do we have any honorable mention? I don't think no. There's no honorable mention. We're jumping directly into the bronze medal, which is Dr. Pershing. Dr. Pershing is basically the card advantage engine that the control decks were looking for. Basically, a card that is cheap and draws you a card every turn for free is very powerful. Obviously, it is a unit that is on the ground, so extremely fragile, extremely easy to kill, but more than likely you get a chance to draw at least one card from it and distract your opponent a little bit. So that's a lot of stuff already for a card that only costs 2. And of course, if the card is not dealt with, then it will draw you 1, 2, 3 cards, sometimes even 4, 5, and then the impact is just incredible. So uh, that's what I chose for bronze medal. Silver medal, I decided to put the client. So the client I thought was one of the best cards in the set when I saw it first. And then the more I play with it, the more I realize it is not as good as I thought it was. I think that the fact that it is Imperial official and 2 attack, 5 health, and shielded by itself makes the card incredible. And I think the card is very good on that basis alone. And I think this is the reason why this card is going to see a lot of play. The ability though has been a big disappointment for me. The ability is really difficult to use. Um, you really have to play the client early on to be able to play him. Whenever you are on the back foot, it is very, very difficult to spend an entire turn using the client, and often not worth it. So uh, the body is amazing, and I think the client will. It's impossible for the client to be a bad card, but it is not as good as I thought. The ability specifically is not as good as I thought. So yeah, if you are afraid of this card as an aggro player, no, the client is not the aggro killer that you are expecting him to be, which I think is a good news. In any case, it's still an incredible card, well deserving of a silver medal. Moving now on the gold medal, I decided to select Supreme Leader Snoke. So basically, the moment I realized that the -2/-2 was only for the opponent units and not for your own, Supreme Leader Snoke became so much stronger in my book. The impact on the game is just incredible. You have to kill Supreme Leader Snoke if you want to win against it in the vast majority of the case. It just completely blocks everything. It is official force 2 very relevant trait. It is an expensive card, but his ability is just so incredibly oppressive that there's certain decks that simply cannot deal with him. It's an extremely good late game curve for any sort of blue-black mid-range control deck. So I've in my top 10 most expensive card in the set, I've rated Supreme Leaders number 10. I realize now that this is a gross under-evaluation. The card is going to be much more expensive than this because in my opinion it is one of the best legendaries in the set. So it is going to be for sure in the top 5 most expensive card in the set at the very least. So yeah, no, it's a great card and well deserving of this gold medal in the blue-black category. Moving on now to blue white. Vigilance, Heroism category. There's once again no honorable mention for that category. So we go directly with the bronze medal with Rose Tycho. So Rose Tycho is a pretty solid card. Comes into play shielded, so ready, 6 health and shielded is incredibly difficult to kill. And then as soon as she attacks, she can, if she wants to, become a 4/8. And a 4/8 for 4 is just pretty gross. Yes, she doesn't have an immediate impact on the game, but as a 4 drop, I don't think it's the end of the world. And obviously, she has very good synergies with Luke because now every unit when it attacks, you can also turn shield into experience for any units, other units. So I think she's very solid. She's also playable in Ray as well. For now, she hasn't really been chosen in Ray, but so yeah, she's a solid card. Is she gonna see a lot of competitive play? It's hard to tell. It will depend on the playability of Luke. If Luke Skywalker sees play, I think she will see play. But other than this, it's hard to tell. In the silver medal, I decided to select Cool. And Cool, I think, is on paper the card is incredible. 2/3 for 2 restore 1 is already constructed playable, even though Arc 170 is in space, so it's arguably better. But the ability is very powerful. So ability basically, if the card matches the base, you get to draw that card. That means that it's even if you're not playing monocolor, it is relatively easy to get like a 50% draw on Cule. One of the reasons why Cule has not seen as much play as I think it should is because having to discard the card forever when it doesn't match your base is a bit annoying because sometimes your key cards are basically not the same color as your base. So it really depends on deck building. Is like, are the cards that matches your base the most important card of your deck? And then depending if the question is yes or no, it might be an inconvenience for you to have this card being discarded forever or not. So I haven't really find a, and obviously the card is absolutely insane in a monocolor deck. I think if you're gonna be running a double vigilance, deck, Cule is absolutely ridiculously good. It basically just draws you a card every time it attacks, which is just ridiculous. Um, on top of having, of course, a 2/3 restore for 2. So I think this card is going to be, it's kind of like a little bit like Charleston, where it's kind of like a card that is a kind of a double aspect card that doesn't say its name. So it's I think it's very good. We might not see a deck for it in Shadows of the Galaxy, but I cannot imagine a world where this card is not going to see any competitive play. At least if it's not this set, it's going to be the next set. This card is just very nasty in terms of its potential. In gold medal, obviously we got the Concord Down Interceptors. This card is so good. It's exactly what the Vigilance Erism decks needed. It's a 3-drop that can be reanimated from Home 1. It has really good. So it's basically kind of like so System Patrol Craft was considered to be one of the best anti-space defense in Spark of Rebellion because of its stat. Like 3/4 is just very good. It just kills the A-wings, kills the X-wing, kills all the 3 health unit we know for, and survive those attacks with a 4 health. Concord Down Interceptor pretty much does all those things, but for 1 cheaper, which is just absolutely incredible. So yes, the +2 attack defense is only on defense, but this is a small downside compared to how much better the fact that it has that it is 3 health, that it costs 3. So this card is an absolute amazing card against space, and I think if blue-white is going to see a lot more play in Shadows of the Galaxy compared to Spark of Rebellion, it will be because of that card. Honestly, I think this card can single-handedly make blue-white one of the best color combinations in the game. This card is really strong. Of course, it's going to depend on the meta. Is there going to be a lot of space units in the meta? My assumption is that the answer of that question is yes, there's going to be a lot of space units in this meta. Now into Mono Vigilances. Once again, forgot the name. No honorable mentions for this. We're going in directly into Bronze Medal, and we're going to be selecting Top Target. So Top Target is one of those bounty cards. It is the highest amount of heal you can get from a single card outside of Vigilance. I mean, no, Vigilance only heal 5, so yes, it is the most amount of healing you can get out of a single card in the entire game. It is very cheap, and in the context of a control deck, having to having to defeat a unit to collect the bounty is really not that big of a downside. So yes, of course, it's not as good as getting 6 health right away, but it is the amount of healing that you get from this card is so absurd. It's basically 2 times a repair, so that's just very very strong. So if you're looking for straight up healing in a control deck, top target is definitely going to be your choice. In silver, we have decided to select um, a card that I think is going to be one of the a very strong sideboard cards in almost every blue deck. Every blue deck that play a certain amount of units will play Evidence of Crime in the sideboard. Taking control of an upgrade is incredibly effective, even though it's limited to 3 or less, but most upgrades in the game cost 3 or less, so I don't think that's a big deal. And not only that, I think even on small upgrades like Experience Token or Shield, this is well worth it. Spending 3 to just take off the shield of something and put it on your own unit, I think that by itself is already good enough. So I think it's a really good sideboard card, and it's gonna see some play. And the gold medal is gonna be, of course, Rivals Fall. Rivals Fall has established itself as the new kind of like catch-all removal for blue. Basically, the kind of thing it used to be Vanquish, but I think costing 1 more and being able to defeat leaders is well worth the extra cost. Basically, what you ask of a card like this is to be able to deal with threat that you cannot deal with other things. And generally speaking, those very big threats are quite expensive. So the fact that having a 1 resources discount with Vanquish or a 2 resources discount with Fail the Dragon is not really that significant, and you would rather just have something that is maybe a little bit expensive, but that's going to be super reliable, that can deal whatever it needs to deal with. And Rivals Fall is establishing itself as a 2 of inclusion in almost every mid-range and control blue deck, and for good reasons. Now let's go into the villainy command aspect, which is as to be considered one of the best aspect combination in Shadow of the Galaxy. In my opinion, it's not an aspect combination that is getting a lot out of Shadows of the Galaxy. I think if Shadow command villainy gets see a ton of play in Shadows of the Galaxy, it will be on the back of the Spark of Rebellion stuff that we have already seen in set 1. So in Bronze Medal, there's the Palpatine's Return. So basically, Palpatine's Return is establishing itself as the new replacement for Emperor's Legion because of its ability to reanimate units back into play. Even so, basically, the difficulties with the Emperor's Legion is that you have to pay the 2 resources for Emperor's Legion plus the unit that you want to put back into play. So you actually have to spend an extra 2 resources, and also you have to play Emperor's Legion the turn the cards have been removed. So the timing in which you have to do things is a little bit more restrictive. Palpatine's Return is much easier because it can instead of getting a 2 resource tax, you're actually getting sometimes a 2 resource discount if you're reanimating a force unit, and if you're just reanimating a normal unit, you're not getting any cost at all. It's just literally it costs 6. The card that you're reanimating is cost 6 less. It's very so it is really much better than Emperor's Legion, and obviously it can be played at any time, even if the unit that you want to reanimate has been killed 2 turns before. You can still play Palpatine's Return. So the way I see Palpatine's Return right now is mostly as a side on anti-control, anti-mid-range sideboard card for grindy matchups, and a replacement for Emperor's Legion. I think it's just it's better than Emperor's Legion. So Emperor's Legion has the advantage of being able to return multiple cards at once, but I think in the majority of the case that is a very situational thing, and I would rather have the cheaper cost and the flexibility of Palpatine's Return, especially if you're playing very large force unit in your deck, which most villainy deck do play. There's so many great ones between, of course, the Emperor himself, Vader, Maul, I forgot the name, Snoke, and all that stuff. So Very strong card. So obviously there's the potential for a reanimator deck to exist in Shadow of the Galaxy, notably with Kylo Ren. So Kylo Ren Force with Palpatine's Return. I feel like there's the few missing pieces for this deck to really be a thing. The fact that the deck heavily relies on Palpatine's Return and you only have 3 copies of the card is kind of a problem, but there's a potential here for the future for the card for sure. Next we got in silver metal we got Maul. Maul has been an incredibly strong card, and in my opinion, it would be one of the best card in Shadow of the Galaxy if it was not competing with Darth Vader. Unfortunately for Maul, there's simply just too many decks that are gonna prefer to play Vader and not Maul. Notably, the more kind of like slower mid-range deck, like the Krennics, the 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 Kira decks, the simply just the Palpatine decks are just the slower decks are gonna prefer to play a Vader instead of a Maul. And I think the only deck that really wants to play Maul over Vader are gonna be the more aggressive black-green decks, so notably Boba Green. So that reason alone, of course, is enough to put Maul in this ranking because Boba Green, I still believe, is going to be a very strong deck in this set. But Maul is gonna have to share the fame with Vader as a 7 drop that has an immediate impact on the game, and I don't think both can be played in the same deck. That would be just too many 7 drops. But yeah, the card has just an immediate impact on the game. Can deal tons of overwhelm damage. The synergy with a friendly underworld unit is not insignificant at all. I think it's a very powerful card. So that's why it's deserving of the silver medal. Um, and then final number one, we got Phase 3 Dark Trooper. It is by far the black-green card that's going to see the most play. I think it's almost an auto-include in all black-green decks. Um, Cell Block Guard was already kind of an almost auto-include in all black-green decks. Just having this Sentinel units early on in the game is very impactful. But it is arguably better because, of course, the ability is very strong. If you play anything that has less than 3 defense, Dark Trooper can attack it, kill it, and then get an extra experience. That means that you can get later on in the game a much better barrage, and that would be just a massive threat. So, so yeah, most of the case it's just a better version of Cell Block Guard, but I think it's that itself alone is going to be enough for this card to see a ton of play. As I said, it's almost I would say almost an auto include in most black-green decks, I would say. At least most black-green defensive decks for sure. And of course, the fact that it can be pulled by Vader is very relevant. It is pulled Imperial and Trooper. Just a very, very strong card. And deserving of the gold medal for that very reason. Next we got Heroism Command, and in this category I have a couple of honorable mentions. So decided to put Modded Cohort and Maz Kanata. Modded Cohort, just a 4/4 ambush for 4 turns out to be pretty good. Some people may consider the raid 2 as a disadvantage, and it is a disadvantage. It is definitely a worse card than 4 LOM, but this means that it has interaction with I forgot the name um, uh, with um, um, forgot the name, Ray. So you can actually give her experience with Ray, and I think that Command Erism, generally speaking, is a color combination that really likes ambush units just simply because of the Ewing reinforcement. Having this kind of card that you're going to be very happy to pull with Ewing reinforcement. Of course, the fact that he has synergies with Boba Fett. So even though it is with Boba Fett, the new Boba Fett, the Daimyo Boba Fett, and I think the combination of the fact so it might be a worse card than for LOM in a vacuum, but in the context of command villainy of command heroism, I think it's a card that's gonna see a significant amount of play because it has a lot of interactions with what is going on with command heroism in set 2. Then Maz Kanata, I think, is also a card that a lot of people underestimated when it was first released. I was not one of them. I definitely saw the potential of the card right away. It is a better version of Vanguard Ace, which is not by itself enough to make this card make an honorable mention, but just a very solid card that I think is going to see play in a lot of different Heroism command deck. Notably Swarmy Han deck with the new Han Red, and obviously with the classic Han in combination with UN reinforcement is gonna be a good place for this card to see a significant amount of play. Anyway, bronze medal decided to give it to Sundari Peacekeeper. Um, a card that hasn't seen so much play, but I think has a lot of potential. Just a 3/5 for 3 restore 2 is incredible. I mean, obviously it only has 3 attack when it's attacking, but I think it's a very solid card. Two very relevant traits. Mandalorian Trooper enough to make it to the bronze here. Can be reanimated with on one. Whether Peacekeeper or Echo-based defenders are going to see more play is going to depend on the meta. But the fact that we are comparing this card to Echo-based defender for slot, it's competing with Echo-based defender in the slot, I think is enough to make it deserve a bronze medal because I consider Echo-based defender to be one of the best card in set 1. So, uh, yeah. Next we got the Marauder. The Marauder is a very interesting card, like just a whenever there's not that much stuff in the game that is really good at fighting space, it turns out, and having the option to have this super anti-space card in those color is just very effective because Bright Hope is nice, but at the end of the day, it doesn't kill anything, and you need something that comes into play after that can actually clean the board, and the Marauder can do that very well. The one blade ability has some powerful implications, and there's good synergies with Han. So all those reasons make him to give silver medal. And then of course, with the gold medal goes to Spark of Hope. There's a big gap in power level between Spark of Hope and all the other command heroism card in this set. It's just extra ramp for for heroism, and heroism definitely needed some extra ramp. It is sort of quote unquote the super laser technician of heroism, and not as good as super laser technician, but close enough that it deserves to see play. And I think that if we see some deck playing command heroism, it's going to be on the back of this card in Shadows of the Galaxy. Just a very good card, and ramp generally speaking is just very powerful in Star Wars Unlimited. Now let's talk about command. So in command, I have a few honorable mentions as well with Cop Veins and Price on Your Head. So Cop Veins is basically a card that I've rated a 10 out of 10, and retrospectively this rating is wrong. I think Cop Veins is not as good as I thought it was. I think pretty much the first thing I overlooked with Cop Veins is the fact that in order to play the 2 cost card that you get from Cop Veins, you actually have to spend an action, and this has a couple of very negative implications. The first negative implication is that if you that it costs you an extra action, so it's very action intensive. And the second problem is if Cop Veins gets killed and you've already taken initiative, you cannot play the true drop that you got from Cop Vein, therefore you can't use him. So those two things taken together are a problem, and Cop Veins is for that reason not as good as I thought he was. I was really expecting him to be a staple in most green decks. It forced to admit that it hasn't been the case. It still see a lot of competitive play. It's still a card that obviously provides tons of value. It has relevant traits. So I think the card is really good. I just don't think it's as good as I rated it initially, the same way as the client. So it's only in the honorable mention, but it's of course still see some play, and it's still gonna have some significant impact. And I think anybody could put this in the top 3 of command cards, no problem. The next one is Price on Your Head. So the main value of Price on Your Head is to be really powerful in combination with Bosk. The double ramp is just incredible, and it is also just extra ramp for ramp deck that needs it. I think the Vader ramp notably really enjoy having extra ramp in his deck. So just the ability to give extra ramp and the fact it's in my opinion one of the best bounty in the game for this is well deserving of an honorable mention. Bronze medal, I'm ranking what I believe to be the best bounty card in the set. It is Bounty Hunter Quarry. Being able to get like a 3-drop in your top 5 or top 10 is very powerful whenever you're only spending 1 resources on this. I don't think this card is no to include in all green decks, but it's gonna see play in a lot of green decks for sure, and for that reason alone, well deserving of bronze. And the reason why, however, what I believe is like every single bounty centric deck, uh, especially Bosk, will always play bounty hunter, will always play green, and the main reason why they will play green is because of bounty hunter quarry, because bounty hunter quarry is so good. Next we got timely intervention. So a lot of people freaked out when they saw this card because being able to give ambush to anything is just so busted. This card has a couple of downside, but it has been as good as we thought it would be. Like it really has been great combination with many cards in the deck that already plays ECL but wants to have in the later stage of the game a way to give units ambush in the later stages of the game. And the fact that the card smuggles really makes the card so much better. I think the card, what really makes the card so good is the fact that it smuggles. If it was not smuggling, I think the card would be a lot worse. But yeah, the fact that it smuggles, the fact that you can simply resource the card and use it later on for only 2 resources is incredible. Timely Intervention has been a very good card and is, my opinion, probably the best smuggle card in the set, in my opinion. Very, very good. And with the gold medal, something that maybe a lot of people would not have expected, Game Moran Retainer. Game Moran Retainer has been incredible. First of all, I've said it before and I'll say it again, 3242 is still a very important stat line in Shadows of the Galaxy. We've seen so many 3342 in the set. Of course, all the 3342 that we had in set 1 still see a heavy amount of play, and there are now even more units with 3 that are 3-3. And obviously having a 3-2 to counter this is very good. And obviously the fact that he can get Sentinel is incredible. And getting another green unit is really not that difficult of a condition to meet in order to turn on the card. So Gamma Retainer has been surprisingly good and is going to see play. I don't think it's an auto include because it depends on the amount of green unit you're playing. But in a deck that plays a lot of green units, it's a very good card and it's well deserved of the gold medal in the mono command category. Next we got aggression villainy ranking. So in aggression villainy, I have no honorable mention because once again aggression villainy did not really get a whole lot in this set in my opinion. On the number in a bronze medal, give it to Jango Fett. Jango Fett has been okay as far as I've been able to play it. Uh, this card would not have made it to the bronze medal in almost any other category, but because there's so few good red-black cards in this set, it does make it there. It's okay with Grand Inquisitor, even though Grand Inquisitor has to play bounty. Like you really have to play bounty to really make this card good. It's good in Bosk undeniably, and it's obviously good with Jabba the Hutt. Will any other deck end up being an important part of the meta? The meta, time will tell. But of the fact that Jango Fett is kind of a staple in those decks, is enough for him to be deserving of the bronze medal. The card draw is also very relevant in bounty decks that generally spend a lot of cards very quickly, so having able to kind of have a card draw from him is quite valuable. In silver medal, there's the Kylo Tai Silencer. Um, this card is not the card, so there's a huge power gap between Jango Fett and Kylo Tai Silencer. Kylo Tai Silencer has been 3-2 for 2 in space are simply just very good, unsurprisingly. Uh, um, it just kills trade with almost anything in space in the early stage of the game. And if there's nothing in space, then it just attacks and puts tons of pressure in space. So in both control and aggressive decks, 3-2 into space are absolutely incredible. And Kylo Tai Sensor is the best of them because it's a 3-2 for 2 without any downside. So the ability is almost irrelevant, I would say. So I don't really take this into account too much in the way I rank this card, but just being a 3-2 for 2 in space is just enough for the card to be extremely good. And it's going to see play in a lot of decks. Pretty much this card is kind of an auto include in every single red villainy deck, and for that reason, well deserving of the silver medal. And it would have been deserving of a gold medal if it was not supplanted by Punishing One. So Punishing One is just once again a very solid card, just a 3-4 for 3. Once again, even without any upsides, even without anything, just simply just a 3-4 for 3 that can be grabbed out of Vader. This by itself is very strong. But that's not the only thing going on with this card. Of course, it's very good with Grand Inquisitor. It does it's very good, of course, with any sort of bounty decks, whether you're playing Jabba. No, not Jabba is a bad example, but if you're playing Bosk. So it has so many interesting synergies, and even if you're not playing a bounty deck, you would be surprised by the amount of upgrades that are being played in this deck. Notably like things that have shield or experience on them that you can defeat and just ready the punishing one and get an extra attack or get an extra kill. 3/4 stat line is a very good stat line to have in space, allows you to kill most of the true drops in the game and still survive. Uh, it's just a very solid card. Moving on, we got Heroism, aggression, which is, in my opinion, one of the most packed, one of the most powerful color combination in the game, and also one of the color combination that got the most help out of the new set. And in this category, there's going to be a lot of honorable mentions. So first of all, we got Heroic Resolved, which I think is turning to be a card that C plays in almost every single aggro deck. Just the flexibility of 1 resources +1/+1 that can turn into a massive swing, a low cost, high potential upgrade that doesn't disturb your 4 calls, I believe in, triggers on Fighter for Freedom. There's just so much going on with this card. This card is incredible. Um, Desperado Fighter is also very good simply because the stats for cost in space is simply just off the chart. It's kind of like the closest thing that aggression Erism gets to a fire spray. So yeah, it doesn't come into play ready, but it does cost 5, which means that you can play it one turn earlier, and at the same time you would have a swing with the fire spray. You can actually attack with Desperado Freighter. So obviously it's not the same thing, but it's still a card that I think is incredible. And it's putting a ton of pressure on the opponent. It's very hard to deal with. There's just not that many cards in the game that can deal with a 6 health space unit that early in the game. Just a very solid card. I think it's going to see play in a lot of Heroism aggression deck. And then finally Ketsu Onyo. So the only sin of Ketsu Onyo is like it's not a rebel. If it was a rebel, it would see play in every single aggression Heroism deck. Now it's more like kind of a sideboard card, but there's just so much going on with this card. Of course, 3/2 for 2 is good stats. Saboteur is great, especially this set where there's a lot of shielded unit. And the fact that it can defeat upgrades every time it attacks the base is very relevant in this set. So many experience tokens, so many shield tokens to take off. So this card is very solid. But here, this is obviously a very packed category. And our number 3 is going to be Cassian Andor. This card is an absolute auto-include in all aggression Heroism deck, in my opinion. 3/5 for 3 is just really good stats. There are better things you can do on turn 2 than just playing a 3/5 for 3 if you're playing aggro. But that's okay because this card has another upside, and that's the Smuggle for 5 that puts the card into play ready. It's kind of like a Falcon. Um, that basically draws you a card when you play him, kind of, because it's like Smuggle. This Smuggle effect is really what putting this card over the edge. It's a rebel. It has the heroism aspect requirement, so it doesn't disturb your 4 cards. It's just absolutely everything aggro would have dreamed of. An incredible card in my opinion. In silver, we got a Wrecker. So I initially rated Wrecker higher than that, but there's been some kind of involvement into how I evaluate the card. I still think this card is incredible, but the cost of defeating your own resources is gonna limit on how much play this card is gonna see. There's just certain decks in which where you have to defeat your own resources is a massive cost. So, for example, any deck that plays a leader that costs 6 or more, that already kind of is a problem for Wrecker because more often you want to play Wrecker as your first action in order to get rid of a unit right away. And if you do this, you have to defeat your own resources, meaning you cannot deploy your leader. So if you're playing a leader that costs 6 or more, Wrecker is kind of difficult to justify because yes, you're killing a unit, but delaying your leader 1 turn is just a massive, massive cost. Deramping you is just a massive cost. So already in a deck where the leader costs 6 or more, that already makes Wrecker a lot worse. And finally, in a deck that plays by the same token any card that cost more than 6 is going to make Wrecker difficult to justify. Deramping you is such a big problem. With that being said, if you are not if you don't care about this, if Wrecker is your most expensive card, if your leader costs 5 or less, then Wrecker is incredible. Because the deramping is not that big of a deal, immediate impact on the game, amazing stats, 7-6 overwhelm. If you're playing it with ECL, it's going to be incredible. It's going to be probably one of the best cards in the deck whenever you're going to be playing a Sabine ECL deck. This card is incredible. But basically, I've kind of like reduced my expectation of Wrecker because he's not as big of an auto include as I thought he first was when I first saw him. So he's up there. He's a great card, but he's not as much of an auto include as I thought he was. Anyway, moving on to our gold medal, it is obviously Poe Dameron. So yeah, as I said, initially I had Wrecker. I ranked Wrecker over Poe Dameron. And I think in a deck where Wrecker is good, Wrecker is better than Poe Dameron. However, and what basically made me put Poe Dameron in gold medal is I think there's more decks that can run him without much of an inconvenience. It turns out that discarding a card is just a far lower cost than having to sacrifice resources, which is obviously quite obvious. And it turns out that many decks can simply just, even if you're just discarding one card, you don't even need a draw engine to make Poe Dameron a good card. And I think that's what makes the card a good card. Obviously, the card is better if you can give it ambush. Obviously, the card is better if you have a lot of card draw, so you can discard some cards to use Poe Dameron more often. Obviously, all those things are true, but even in a deck that has none of that, Poe Dameron is still going to be a relatively solid card. And for that reason alone, it deserves to be gold medal. And it is one of the best cards in the set, and probably is going to be one of the most expensive cards in the set. I rank this card as number 3 most expensive card in the set in my ranking. I think it is number 2, and it might actually be number 1. After, of course, a bit of a re-evaluation. Next, we got my ranking for Mono Aggression. And Mono Aggression is, as far as Mono Aggression is concerned, we got a couple of honorable mentions. So first, I wanted to give honorable mention to Hotshot DL 44 Blasters, even though this card is more of a cunning card than it is an aggression card. Obviously, ideally, you want to play this card in a cunning aggression card, but I think where this card shines the best is, I think it's better as a, if you play cunning and no aggression, it's still going to be a pretty good card, because just this extra punch that you can give out of smuggle is very powerful. The fact that it cannot be played on mono vehicle is kind of a big deal, but I still believe the card is very impactful. One of the inconveniences of upgrade is the card disadvantage that they provoke whenever the unit that is upgraded get dealt with. But obviously, if you play the card out of smuggle, you're not really getting card disadvantage, and the fact that you get to attack right away as the card is being equipped means that you are getting some value out of the upgrades almost automatically, which is pretty great. Next, we got Pillage, which is the card that I've previewed to you guys, and I think this card is better than I thought it was. The synergies with I don't know why, honestly. I don't have the explanation, but somehow there's something so powerful about discarding 2 cards in Star Wars Unlimited that is not the case in Magic. Maybe because we draw 2 cards per turn and you can go wait for your opponent to draw 2 cards and then play the Pillage, but Pillage just has an amazing impact on the game. A huge impact on the game. It's very powerful in combination with Fourth Throw, and the discard archetypes. We see the Ray deck based on Pillage is very powerful, as we've seen it, and for those reasons, so Pillage still remains a very situational card, but I think in the right deck this card is incredible, so I think it well deserves an honorable mention. I think Aggression overall is just like Cunning, has had a lot of good stuff in this set. And my bronze medal goes to Bo-Katan Kryze, which in my opinion is the best double aspect card in the set. Just as usual, 3/3/4/2 is incredible, 2 very relevant trade, Mandalorian Troopers, and a very relevant ability that draws you a card is whenever she dies and the opponent has 15 damage or more. An absolute auto include in any double aggression deck, of course. And I think a strong reason to be playing double aggression. I think double aggression is going to see a lot more play in Spark of Rebellion, no, in Shadow of the Galaxy over Spark of Rebellion, and I think most can be contributed to Bo-Katan in general. Silver Meta, we got Daring Raid. This card is just so incredibly flexible and cheap. Uh, of course, whether or not this card is going to see a lot of play is going to depend a lot on the meta. Is there a lot of 2 health unit in the meta? That's going to, but the fact that it can also deal damage to the base, the fact that it combines very well with Stark in Town, all those things makes this card very strong. It's going to be a staple in red decks for sure. And in gold medal, I decided to give it to Cryge Dragon, which I ranked to be I ranked this card to be the most expensive card in the set. Uh, Maybe Podamron is going to be more expensive after re-evaluating a bit how good Podamron is, but I still believe it's going to be. If it's not number one, it's going to be the second most expensive card in the set for sure. The fact that it can be played in any red deck, and it is, in my opinion, the most powerful late game card in the game. It is the best 9-drop in the game, for sure. It is a card that has such a massive impact on the game. So yeah, it does not stabilize the game right away. So if you're in a desperate situation and you play this, it's not going to save you. But if you're playing this on an even or relatively empty board, the card is almost like a win button. It's just extremely impactful. And if you deal with him, you're going to take tons of damage. And if you don't deal with him, you're going to take it's going to be a 10-10 overwhelm that's going to kill you very quickly. I think ramp decks based on red are getting a huge buff from this card. Notably like the Vaders, the Palpatines, the ramp hand decks. All those decks are really going to benefit so much from this card. Next, we're gonna go into our Mono Villainy. Obviously, Mono Villainy is only a few cards, so there's not that many amazing cards that you can have in such a small category. But with that being said, we'll still find a couple of gems. Incinerator Trooper has been very surprisingly good. It's basically kind of like the card itself is not great, but it has simply just there is a lot of support for that card in both Spark of Rebellion and Shadow of the Galaxy. Very strong with Gideon, good with Gram of Tarkin. Anything that can grow its attack value, of course, really good with Surprise Strike, with um, Snowtrooper Lieutenant, the fact that it's Imperial and Trooper. So it's a card that in a vacuum is not so good, but there's just so many good synergies with this card in the set. It doesn't need to be equipped. You just need to give him a temporary attack bonus and just snatch a unit without dying, and it's just very impactful. It's a card that is easy to deal with, but if you don't deal with it, you're gonna suffer. It's a card that really puts you into a lot of pressure to kill it, because if you don't kill it, you're gonna suffer the consequence. In silver medal, and some people might be surprised to see this card only in number 2. We got Toro Calican. Obviously 3/5/3 is amazing stats, and the ability is quite strong. The ability to untap whenever you play another bounty hunter. The only problem is that there's just not that many great bounty hunters in this set, I believe. His ability, it's not going to fit in every deck, because just a 3/5/3 on its own, it's fine, but it depends on the deck, right? But I don't think it's quite good enough on its own. But it's undeniably a very strong card, and as we see more bounty hunter, this card is only going to get stronger and stronger. Love the art on that card, by the way. And in gold medal, may be surprising to some, but I decided to put Black Sun Starfighter. This card is not very flashy. It's a 3/2 Sentinel for 3, but it is exactly the card that Villainy needed. Villainy always struggled in the early stages of the game against space aggro. It is true with every deck. We had to go, almost all Villainy deck had to play Consortium Star Viper with ECL. They need to play like kind of weird techs in order to fix that problem. Kylo Ren, TIE Silencer, and Black Sun Starfighters, those two cards combined really solve a lot of the early game space problem that Villainy was having. The fact that you can now grab a Sentinel in space out of your Vader is super relevant. Like it was when you were getting overwhelmed in space and you were playing your Vader, you always felt like, oh no, this Vader is not gonna help me at all, and you knew it. But with Black Sun Starfighter being part of the card pool, it changes a lot of that. So I think this card is very strong. Not once again because it's strong in a vacuum, but just because it answers a specific issues that Villainy has been having in the set. Now let's go into Heroism, or Heroism top 3. So Heroism, obviously not a lot going on with it, but we'll still have a couple of good cards. Smuggler's Aid takes the bronze medal. It is basically a repair that can be smuggled. Um, I think this card is pretty solid, and I think if Aggro Burn ended up seeing a lot of play, I think Smuggler's Aid is going to see some play in a lot of the sideboards of the Heroism deck, because it's a way to just heal your base out of nowhere for only 3 resources. In Smuggle, most of the time I think you want to play this card with Smuggle. So I think this card is honestly pretty good. Obviously, it would never have made it to the top 3 on any of the other category, but obviously, Erism, there's so few mono Erism cards that it makes it to the bronze medal for this category. In silver medal, I decided to put This Is the Way. I've not been very impressed with Mandalorians in this set, but if there's a Mandalorian deck that ever emerge, I think This Is the Way will be a card that's gonna see play into it, or even a deck that plays like a lot of upgrades. So to me, I'm not sure if this deck is gonna be competitive, but if it does, This Is the Way will definitely see play, because this card is arguably very powerful. And number 1, far beyond This Is the Way and Smuggler's Aid, we have Tech. Um, I'm unsure whether or not Tech is going to see a lot of play, because it's a card that is very meta dependent. I think if the meta is very slow, very grindy, Tech is going to see a lot of play. For now, it is mostly considered a sideboard card as a way to kind of help in those kind of grindy match. Obviously, the potential of the card is immense. The amount of card advantage you can get from this is incredible. The stats are not bad, but it is a very slow card. So, but yeah, it's a card that for sure is going to see some competitive play, and how much competitive is going to see, it's highly going to depend on what kind of meta we are. Is it going to be a slow meta where card advantage is very important? Then you're going to see Tech for sure. Next, we got the neutral category, and surprisingly, neutral cards are really good in this set. They're actually better than the mono Erism card in my opinion. In bronze, we get Lady Proxima. Uh, I don't know if the Underworld deck needs her, but I think it's very likely that she's going to see that. So far, as far as I've seen, she's been playing every single Underworld deck I've seen. Will it end up making the cut on the long run? Time will tell. I've not really played myself a lot of Underworld decks, so Underworld player will be able to tell me more accurately if this card is gonna. But it is undeniably the third best neutral card in the set, in my opinion. The value that she provides over time. There's a lot of cheap Underworld unit. You play them back into your hand with McClunky. You play them again. So yeah, it's a solid card. Very good interaction, of course, with Cad Bane, which I think is a very solid leader. So yeah, bronze medal. Silver medal goes to Rich Reward. It is a bounty that can be played in any different color, and it is a pretty good bounty. It is a bit more situational than the other bounties because you do need to have 2 units in play in order to get the full potential of the card. But when you do, the impact is just incredible. And obviously, the fact that you can double it up with Bosk is even stronger. So it's a card that's going to see some competitive play in the sort of Bosk aggro deck, and for that reason, deserving a silver medal. And way beyond Rich Reward and Lady Proxima, we got Mercenary Gunship. Arguably the best neutral card ever made for Star Wars Unlimited so far. As I said earlier, 3-2-4-2 in space is incredible, and having access to this in every single color means that this card is going to see a lot of play. Obviously, it does have a downside, but the downside, it is significant. Like having this option available to your opponent is going to be something that is going to be a bit of a problem. But as far as I've been testing, this downside has not been massive enough that the card would not see play. The card is still does very much what it's supposed to do, even without downside taken into account. So now we've done pretty much all the regular cards. Let's talk about the leaders now. So I've already done my tier list leaders, so I'm not going to go into too much details because if you want to know, I did a detailed tier list about the different leaders. But just to reiterate on what I believe are the best leaders in the set, an honorable mention for Kira because she was very, very close to making it top 3, and maybe she deserved to be in top 3. But yeah, it's a leader that has a very powerful when deployed ability if you play the right deck. Once again, deck that can really capitalize on the unit being half health, like a deck that would play overwhelming barrage or that kind of thing. Um, the leader ability is also quite impactful if you play the right cards. So I think in the green, there's going to be a Kira green mid-range deck in the Tech Initiative Top Cut. I'll be excited to see how it performs. And yeah, but the leader is pretty solid. It is the best villainy leader in the set, in my opinion. I think it's quite obvious. Um, I already spoiled you a little bit. You know, there are not going to be any villain leaders in that podium. And in bronze medal, I decided to give it to Boba Fett the Daimyo, which might be a controversial opinion. I've seen a lot of people not liking Boba Fett Daimyo, and I think his leader ability is very, very strong. 4-7 for 6 is not terrible stats, but his ability is very strong because it's not, as opposed to, it's kind of like a +1 attack bonus to almost all of your units. Um, um, but I think that if you compare this to something like, for example, Gar Saxon, yes, you get a +1 attack ability to all your stuff without much effort, but you need to be playing specific card, to benefit from that +1 attack bonus. Well, Boba Fett, you just have to play unit with keywords, and there's just almost every unit in the game has keywords, especially in Command Heroism. The fact that you can wear Boba Fett armor is a big deal as well. So I think the Boba Fett's deck, whether it's going to be with yellow or with blue, have a lot of potential. A lot of Obviously it's a deck that's going to have a lot of ambush units, a lot of sentinel units. So I think it's a very good leader and well deserving of the bronze medal. But I still put it in the B tier category. So there's a big gap between the number 3 and the number 2. And my number 2 is obviously Rey. Not too much of a surprise. I rated this card very highly in my tier list. I think she's the best Vigilance Heroism leader in the game. She has a very strong leader ability in the context of Heroism. There's tons of units with low attack, high health. The interaction with cards like Concordan Interceptor or R2D2 is extremely impactful. And the fact that she has Restore 3 as a leader is incredible. She's also Force, which is an extremely relevant trait to have for a leader. So for all those reasons, Rey, in my opinion, is going to be moving forward the go-to leader if you want to play Vigilance Heroism. And yeah, so she's very good. She's very solid. So maybe she plays a little bit too fair. I don't know if she will stand the test of time in the meta. Forced to admit that leaders of Shadows of the Galaxy are significantly weaker than the leaders in Spark of Rebellion, in my opinion. So will she make it to the long run? I believe so. I think Luke Skywalker still has an argument to say in this. Maybe Luke Skywalker might see some play if we're in a meta where shields are very powerful. But yeah, if that's not the case, then Rey is absolutely going to be your go-to option for Vigilance Heroism leader and well deserving of the second spot on this list. And I rated A tier on my tier list. And the gold medal, of course, not surprising. Everybody agreed on the fact that Han Solo, right from the get-go, right from the moment he was spoiled, everybody agreed that Han Solo was going to be the best leader in Shadow of the Galaxy. Some people consider it to be one of the best leader in the game. I personally disagree with this. I think he's on par with the top tier leader that is on par with the old Han Solo, with Vader, with Krennic, with Iden. Is on par with that power level, but I don't think he's quite up there with the best leader in the game like Boba Fett. That's kind of how I stand on him. There's a wide diversity of different decks you can play with him. You can play a ramp, a Han Solo deck. You can play an aggressive, uh, kind of like an aggressive swarm deck with him. His ability is just very, very powerful. His stats are terrible, but I think his ability is so good that it compensates that. And most importantly, he's in one of the most popular color combination in the game. Heroism Aggression is incredibly powerful aspect combination, and the fact that you can play ECL on top of this is just incredible. So for all those reasons, Han Solo is well deserving of the gold medal of the best leader in the game. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. And now let's talk about the non-leader. This is kind of the ultimate final top three ranking. I mean, obviously nothing is final. It's the game has not even been released yet, so as I said, I still could very well be wrong on a lot of those picks. I'm always try to take this into account, but this is kind of my overall ranking. So on my overall ranking, I have a couple of honorable mentions: Wrecker, Supreme Leader Snoke, and Concordant Interceptors. All three of those cards can potentially be placed in the top three best cards in in the set. Uh, um, so, but I couldn't choose. So I decided to put them in honorable mentions. My number three, I decided to put Bazin Nettle. Um, I think the impact that she's gonna have on the meta is gonna be huge. I think she's gonna be an auto include in, as I said, either in the main deck or in the sideboard in all Cunning Villainy decks, and Cunning Villainy decks is gonna be one of the strongest color combinations in the set. That's enough, I think, to give it at least the bronze medal. Podamron in second place. A lot of people would place this card in gold medal. Um, I believe that this card is going to see a lot of play, but I don't think it's going to be the massive powerhouse in all those decks. As I said, I think in order to really make Podamon a, a powerhouse, you really need to be giving it ambush with ECL or timely intervention, and obviously you need to be playing specifically green, red, white in order to have that. So for that reason, I think Podamron is and he's gonna see play once again beyond that, but I think in decks that don't have the ability to give in ambush, I don't think he's gonna be as good. I think he's gonna be. We're still talking about a 5-drop that doesn't have immediate impact on the game. Obviously, this 5-drop is so incredibly pushed that is end up seeing play. But I think the card is gonna be very solid. But I didn't quite give him the gold medal because I gave the gold medal of the overall winners once again to Cray Dragon. I think Cray Dragon is gonna have such a massive impact on the game. I could be wrong about this. I could be completely wrong about this, but I think the fact that this card can be played in both Villainy and Heroism, the fact that it gives a top ender to all of the Heroism deck, that Heroism deck before did not have access to a strong game ender. The fact that this game ender is can be is the best 9-drop in the game, possibly the best late game card in the game. The fact that so there's just a lot of stuff with Cray Dragon that makes me think the fact that we got so much more ramp in the set, both for Erism and Villainy, all those things combined makes me think that Cray Dragon is going to be a major fourth in the meta. I could be completely wrong about this, and but this is kind of my gut feeling, and that's why I decided to put it on number one of the overall and my take for the best non-leader card in Star Wars Limited. I never rate leaders and cards together because for me they're just two completely different categories of cards. Same for base. I always rate those three things separately because for me they cannot be compared to one another. But yeah, that's my take on Creator Dragon. Thank you so much for following this video. I hope this. Let me know if this format of ranking is fun for you. It was definitely very fun to put together. And I hope you enjoyed it. And once again, if you like that kind of video, please like and subscribe, and check out my coaching schedule if you're interested in personalized help to get better at the game. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.